Welcome to the Connected Spirit Podcast, a space where the mystical and the human experience merge, where we explore what it really means to walk a spirit-led path. I'm Courtney Dawson, an ethical medium and mentor, and for as long as I can remember, I have felt the presence of the spirit world. But my journey hasn't been simple. It's been one of self-discovery, healing from religious and emotional trauma, navigating fear, judgment, and the loneliness that comes with embracing something the world doesn't always understand. This podcast is here to take what was once considered woo and bring it into the real lived experience of being human. Because mediumship isn't just something we do, it's who we are. Here we dive into the conversations no one else is having, breaking down misconceptions, exploring the unseen, and normalizing the journey of deep connection. We'll talk about the beauty and the struggle of being a medium. We'll laugh, we'll reflect, we'll go deep. And most importantly, we'll remember who we are, why we're here, and how spirit moves through us all. So if you've ever felt something more, if you've ever questioned the unseen, or if you're simply ready to embrace the fullness of your spiritual path, you're in the right place. Hey friends, welcome back to the Connected Spirit Podcast. Today we have an incredible intuitive here today. I'd love to introduce you to Julie Ryan. She's a psychic medium, medical intuitive, and serial entrepreneur who has spent over 30 years developing her intuitive and healing abilities. She's founded 9 companies across 5 different industries. She's invented globally distributed surgical devices and somehow managed to blend a powerhouse business career with extraordinary spiritual gifts. Today, Julie is known as a buffet of psychicness. She can scan the human body, detect illness, facilitate energy healings, access past lives, and communicate with spirits both living and deceased, all from a distance. She practices only with permission and holds strict confidentiality as a cornerstone, of her ethical approach. She's also the host of Ask Julie Ryan, one of the top 0.05% of podcasts worldwide, streamed in over 100 countries, where she scans callers live every week. Above all, Julie is a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and living proof that you can be both fully grounded in both the spiritual world and the real one. Julie, so good to have you here.
Oh, what a delight to be with you. Thank you so much for those kind comments.
You have an extraordinary career, lived experiences, life story, and I'm sure people have asked you 100 times about your life. But I want to look at this maybe a little bit deeper. You've went from inventing surgical devices that were distributed globally to communicating with spirit. That is, I don't think anybody would ever expect someone to say, yeah, this is how I went from here to here. And I feel like there's a version of that story that most people haven't heard. What actually happened?
Well, I started getting interested in what I call woo-woo. You know, woo in Taoism means source. And I love the word woo-woo because it's just fun. And we're supposed to be having fun when we're doing this stuff, number one. And number two, we're supposed to be having fun during our lives as well. So when I was in my business career, I started my first company in my 20s. I didn't know any of this existed. I mean, I'd heard of psychics and astrology people, and I knew what a tarot card was. I maybe saw a tarot card reader at a party or something, but it just wasn't on my radar. And then one day, Courtney, a friend, gave me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace. This was more than 30 years ago. And she called herself a medical intuitive. And I thought, what the heck is that? I'd never heard that term before. And as you mentioned, I'm an inventor and former manufacturer of surgical devices. And so I'd been in the healthcare industry for about 10 years at that point on the supply side, not the drug side, the supplies that you'd see in a hospital, the hospital supply side. And I thought, that's interesting. I'm helping people heal, but with their doctors and their medical providers. So back then we didn't have the internet yet. And I did the old fashioned thing and I went to the bookstore. I went to a Barnes and Noble because I thought they'd be more likely to have something even than my local library. And sure enough, I found a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by the late Barbara Brennan, PhD. Barbara was a former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable languaging for the non-scientific mind. That would be me. And I read her book. Now, this was written more than 40 years ago, her book, maybe even longer, and wanted to know more. So I called her school, which on the time was in New York on Long Island. I said, "Do you guys got anybody teaching this stuff in my area?" And they did. They said, "Yes. As a matter of fact, we have a woman who's just graduated and she's opened her own school." I said, "Great." So I studied with her for 6 years. She's still a dear friend and a mentor to me. She's in her mid 80s now, and she's just wonderful. And so she had studied Barbara Brennan's work on energy healing. She had studied Kabbalistic healing. She had studied other modalities. And then she kind of mushed it all together into her own goulash, if you will. And and that's what I learned to do and what I understood. And she said this all those years ago, Courtney. She said, "This is 10% technique, 90% transfer of energy." And that's what I say. What I teach people all over the world how to do my buffet of psychicness in a weekend. And coming up, May 16th and 17th, online, live for the weekend. It's a blast. We do take breaks, but it's 90% transfer of energy, 10% technique. And so that's how I got into all of this. And when I was doing it, it was so funny, Courtney, because my family and friends would say, "Well, what are you going to do with this?" And I'd say, "I don't know." And they'd say, "Well, why are you even doing this?" I'd say, "I have no clue. I'm just being led." Fast forward to today, and I do it full time.
That's so powerful, your story, because you're like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm following this, and you're trusting it and you're surrendering to that. And as a mediumship teacher, and just as an intuitive, a medium myself, that was one of the biggest lessons that I really had to grapple with, learning to surrender and trust. But when you do that, you open yourself up to these incredible possibilities and opportunities and moments that would pass you by if you weren't in that place of, okay, let's see what's going to happen here.
Well, and I think we all are born with intuition and
Yeah,
we're getting guidance 24/7, but we get 70,000 plus thoughts a day into our brains, and we have to filter what are our priorities? Do we have a family? Do we have kids? Are we worried about doing the laundry or making dinner or what's happening at work? Things like that. And so we don't really receive a lot of the messages that are going because we're not on the right channel. I have a communications degree and I'm an inventor of surgical devices. How's that work? It's long before I knew about woo woo, but I was inspired and then I acted on that inspiration. And I think we all do that, whether our inspiration is what to have for breakfast in the morning or what to wear, what outfit to put on, or what to do for fun, what to do with your family, where to send your kids to school, on and on and on. We're all inspired. It's just a matter of taking action.
absolutely. And that's what you've done and you continue to do, and it's incredible. I'm so inspired by you. I love this. I
Oh.
want to kind of shift a little bit here. I would love for you to walk us through the 12 phases of transition. Not really the clinical version, but what does the soul actually experience as someone who's moving through the death process?
hmm Well, let me back up a little bit. There's lots of information about the afterlife. There's lots of information about near-death experiences, and there's lots of information about grieving when we lose a loved one, but not so much about what happens as we're actually dying. And that's what people are afraid of. And my 12 phases of transition, what I've coined it, is what we all go through at the end of our lives. And it's a glorious process where we're surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets. And based on the configuration of those spirits, we can tell how close to death somebody is. We can communicate with the patient. We can ask them. I always ask everybody with whom I work, and my graduates do the same thing. Are you ready to go? Are you in pain? What do you need? And Are you ready to go? That's yes or no. Are you in pain? Yes or no. What do you need? It just spans from a piece of chocolate cake to I need to talk to my sister. Can you have her come over and even more complicated things like that. So the interesting thing is that university-based research validates that 90% of people at the end of their lives see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're transitioning. And so we used to think, oh, grandma is just hallucinating from the morphine that the hospice nurse has given her. Well, no, she's not. She's able to communicate with perhaps her mother who's been dead for 40 years, but her spirit's in the room and she's having a conversation with her mother. Every critical care practitioner in the medical business, every hospice worker, every funeral director has thousands of stories about this happening. And it's just been something that people haven't really spoken that much about in recent years. So I love that the university-based research has validated, what we all know to be true. So to answer your question, what happens is we're spirits attached to a body having a human experience. And when somebody's dying, the first phase of transition is the spirit and the body start to separate. And I see that as a bubble that's on top of the person who's dying's head. Like think of a cartoon with a speech bubble
Yeah.
or the caption where the character's thoughts or comments are enclosed. And then that's phase one. And then phase two is the parents' spirits show up, the maternal spirit that raised the person who's dying, the birth mother, the adopted mother, the perhaps the grandmother. It's on the maternal line who raised the person who's dying. They're the ones that run the show from the spirit world. They show up first. That really surprised me, Courtney. I thought God's probably got some department in heaven, like the dying department, and they get a notice. Okay, Stanley Smith is dying in Oklahoma City. Send angels to go help. Send an angel to go help him. That's not how it works. It's Stanley's mother spirit that shows up. If his mother's still alive, it's going to be his maternal grandmother. If she's still alive, it's going to be her mother, which is really interesting to me. It's always
Ah,
on the maternal line.
that's so interesting. Has the spirit world ever shown you why that is?
Well, just simply because, what do mothers do? We take care of our kids, even from
Yeah.
the grave. The other thing that I find interesting about it, and I really haven't done a deep dive in it. I've just seen it thousands of times, so I just accept it. And I saw it when my own mother was dying. The thing that's interesting about it is, especially in Judaism, the child is not considered Jewish unless he's born from a Jewish mother, which is why a lot of Gentile women who marry Jewish husbands and they want to raise their children Jewish, they'll convert to Judaism and that's been since the beginning of time. And that's just one culture slash religion. I'm sure there are more, but it's the maternal spirit. The maternal spirit is the earth, is Mother Mary, is
Hmm.
Isis, is the creation of all of this stuff, and the one that nurtures everybody and everything and makes it happen and makes it grow. And the whole patriarchal versus matriarchal, I think, had a split early on, but the matriarchal is absolutely just as powerful as the patriarchal. So the mother's
Absolutely.
spirit comes in first, and then we go through the other phases that until the person is carried off to heaven, escorted by angels.
So it's very much a collaborative experience versus just your immediate loved ones who are there to greet you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Because what happens like as we progress, so the parent spirits come in and let's say just for this conversation, our dying person is in a bed, face up, laying on their back. So the parental spirits are at that patient's feet. And then the mother spirit again brings in the angels and they will form a circle with the parental spirits anchoring the circle and they'll surround the dying person. And these are big old angels as I perceive them, Courtney. Now, I went through 12 years of Catholic schools. So I was taught angels have big wings, wear white gowns, they're barefoot, they have a rope belt, all of that. To somebody who perhaps grew up in the Amazon, in the jungle, in an indigenous culture, they may see angel energy as just a ball of purple haze or something. Where a spirit's going to appear to us, you know this, in a way that's going to make sense to us so we can identify that energy that is making up the spirit. So as the person's getting closer to death, that circle of angels anchored by the parents starts to open up and come into a horseshoe. And eventually it'll be a straight line across the foot of the bed. Several nuances. Around phase five-ish, six-ish, there are two additional angels that show up and they position themselves on either side of the spirit bubble that's attached to the top of the head. And the first time I saw this was when my mom was dying. And I thought, this is interesting. I have no clue what these angels are going to do, but I know they're going to play a role. About that time, too, all the deceased animal spirits show up and they can be every pet the person ever had in their life. I see farm animals. Not too long ago, I saw safari animals in this man's room. I was talking with his wife, and she wanted to do an instant replay of his death because she wanted to know who was there and all that. I said, there are giraffes and zebras and elephants and safari animals in there, lions and tigers. And I said, did he work at a zoo or something? And she laughed and she said, no, but he was in the Peace Corps for 10 years in Africa and he worked in those refuges for those animals. So that's the first time I've seen that in thousands and thousands of, helping somebody at the end of their life and their family. So that's fun. And then as we progress through the 12 phases, more and more spirits show up from not only the person's current lifetime, their family, their friends, their acquaintances throughout their whole life, but also spirits from all the lives they've lived. And they show up in period dress, which is really fun. So might see somebody dressed in Renaissance clothing or 1960s miniskirt and go-go boots, the Twiggy era, things like that. And by the time the person actually passes, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of spirits there, and they look like specks on the horizon.
Mm.
And I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee because they're there to welcome the person. Everybody goes to heaven. There was a movie in the 1980s, All Dogs Go to Heaven. Well, people go to heaven too, regardless of what you've been taught. Everybody goes to heaven. And a couple of other nuances. May I share those?
Please. Yeah, absolutely.
One is those angels on either side of the spirit bubble, about phase 9, between 9 and 10, their wings start to move. And again, the first time I saw this was with my mother, and it reminded me of a giant owl. Silent, rhythmic, slow movement, but so strong that I could almost feel an upward pull, like the drag, from their wings moving. I could see it, I could hear it, I could, feel it. And what happened was their movement of their wings over a prolonged period of time created a vortex above my mother's head. Think of a funnel cloud, like in a tornado. It felt like going through the car wash where they turn the dryer on at the end and it's sucking all the water up off your car. And so that happened, Courtney, and I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting to see what's happening. And I figured that would help my mother's spirit separate from her body. And in fact, that's what it did. It went up through there, through that vortex. And then the angels escorted it to heaven. Mm. So the interesting thing when I was writing Angelic Attendants, my book, is I thought, I'm just going to do an internet search on owl wings vortex. Come to find out, there's this aeronautical engineering phenomenon called the wingtip vortex, which happens with every plane, every jet, every kite, every bug, every bird. And it's how the air goes over and under the wings, and vortices form underneath the wings and cause lift. And I thought, holy Moses, that's what I watched happen with my mother. And then when her spirit detached from her body, she went up and to the right. And I've seen this thousands and thousands of times since. And I thought, okay, I'm seeing something, feeling it, hearing it that angels are doing. I can feel it in my human perspective. And it's also helping my mother's spirit separate from her body. The part that I didn't know about why they always go up and to the right. And that was answered a few years ago when I was giving a talk, and there was a physicist in my audience, and he came up afterwards and he said, I know why the spirit goes to the right. Because it's depicted that way in all the old masters' paintings, too. I said, please enlighten me. And he said, well, think about when you're putting a lid on a jar, you screw it down, right, to the right,
Yeah.
going down. You want to put it on. When you're taking it off, what are you doing? You're screwing it off counterclockwise and you lift it off and to the right because it's got lift. And I thought, okay, that works. So that was really fascinating. One other interesting point about these 12 phases of transition from a historical standpoint, at my mother's funeral mass, Catholic mass, there is a prayer said called In Paradisum at every Roman Catholic mass. And in Latin, In Paradisum translates into paradise. And it talks about how the angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. And I was there and I thought, holy heavens, that's exactly what I just saw with my mom. And so when I was writing Angelic Attendants, I did some research to find out where did that originate. And I learned that it began as a 5th century Gregorian chant. Now, perhaps it took till the 5th century till somebody was well educated enough that they could read and write. And certainly those were men living in monasteries. They were the monks living in monasteries and synagogues. And I thought, I'll bet everybody's been able to see these phases of transition since the beginning of time. And it just took that long for somebody to really write it down. But all these years later, we're still reciting that prayer or that chant about what happens, and I'm able to see it and describe the animals and the people that are in the room, and the family knows who I'm talking about and all of that. So I find that really remarkable as well.
It's incredible how there's such a connection between science and spirituality. And when we have that understanding, that's why I loved studying spiritualism in my training and becoming ordained, because when I started learning about it, a big part of it is about the science of it. And that always fascinated me because I love the spirituality and the woo, but I like that practical side. And then hearing stories like yours, I go, see, this is where it resonates and lands with me, where we can have that space of, yes, we can believe in things unseen, but we also have the science to back up these things actually do in fact happen. It's incredibly powerful.
Well, and science is catching up with woo woo because woo woo's been
Yes.
since the beginning of
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
it is. Julie, what's the thing that completely reframes how people are thinking about dying? Because I think most of us are carrying a picture in our heads that is completely wrong or perhaps influenced by outside sources, maybe family, religion,
Movies, you know,
movies. Yeah,
Ghost, the movie
yeah,
Ghost with Demi Moore,
yeah.
like these bad guys, Harry Potter, all of that. Yeah. Well, it's that nobody dies alone, first of all. Everybody goes to heaven. We're surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets. How my book even came around. If anybody wants this, and it's got diagrams in it of the 12 phases of transition. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we're all going to go through it. Everybody's going to die, and you're going to lose a loved one. You want a free copy? We'll send you a free digital and audiobook version. Just go to askjulieryan.com. It's on the homepage. Click on that. We'll send you a free audiobook or digital download, and it's in Spanish too. We've got a Spanish version. But how it all came about, Courtney, was one day I was with my mentor, and when she's doing a healing on me, my deceased loved one's spirits line the table and they participate in the healing. And one day, the spirit of this dead Pope walked in, and he had his Pope hat on and his shepherd's rod and the whole 9 yards. And I said, well, who are you? and my mentor could see him too. And I said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Clement." And I said, "Okay, hi. I'm really sorry, but I've never heard of a Pope Clement before." And he laughed and he said, "Okay, well, I was number six." I said, "Okay, great. How may I help you?" Kind of like, "Why are you here?" And
Yes.
he said, "You're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies because it's been so bastardized. And you know what happens." By this point, my mother had been gone for a couple of years. I'd helped several other families. And he said, "People are so afraid, and it's crazy because it's glorious and you know it." And I said, "Well, thank you so much for your kind comments and your vote of confidence. But you see, I'm a businesswoman and people will think I'm nuts if I talk about this. So I'm really not interested. But thanks for stopping by." And he
Yeah.
chuckled and he said, "Yeah. Everything you've done in business has been to prepare you for this. And you just need to get on with it. Kind of like just do it." And he's treating me like a Nike ad. Just go do it. And again, I said, "Thank you so much, but I just really am not interested because I
Mhm.
don't want it to affect my businesses and my companies." And he left. He kind of chuckled and he left. So a few minutes later, I'm getting in my car to leave, Courtney. And just for kicks, I pulled him up on my phone, Pope Clement the Sixth. Come to find out, this guy was in office during the Black Plague. He's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I
Oh
thought,
my God.
"Ryan, you can't make that up."
No.
And then he prodded me for a couple more years, and two other events happened. May I share those that
Please.
really
Yes.
got
Yes.
me to
Yes.
polish my golden ovary courage? Because, guys have brass balls and girls have golden ovaries. So, at church one Sunday, sitting between my husband and my son, and the priest said, "Wouldn't it be nice if somebody could really tell us if we're created by angels and our loved ones and led into paradise, like it says in Paradisum?" I'm getting elbowed from my husband and my son. And I thought, "Okay, God, really? From the pulpit, you're giving me grief about this?" Okay. So I wrote the book, thought, all right, I'll put the website up, put askjulieryan.com up. And I thought, I might get nailed. Somebody's going to nail me on this. And a month later, I was giving a business talk in Texas, and the room was full of C-suite executives, primarily men. And I gave my business talk, and then afterwards, this guy came up to me and he had his iPad open, and it was to askjulieryan.com. And I thought, "Oh, here we go." And he said, "Is this you?" And I said, "Well, yes, it is. I'm thinking my pictures all over the homepage." And he said, "I'd really like to know more." And I smiled and I said, "Okay." He said, "Can we sit together at lunch?" And I said, "Sure." And in my brain, I'm thinking, "Great. I'm going to get pummeled for an hour at lunch about this." So we sit at this table of eight. There are seven men, all executives, and me. And all they wanted to talk about, Courtney, was spiritual stuff. They didn't want to talk about the conference, what my talks covered, none of that. They just wanted to talk about spiritual stuff. And so after that, I thought, "Okay, God, I'm in. All right. Okay. I got the message. I'm going to do it." And then that's how this all began.
It's incredible. Julie, is there a moment in that transition phase when someone who we love is dying and they know, like there's an awareness that they are dying, even if their body can't physically say, okay, I'm getting ready here?
Oh, yeah. I think everybody does. The important thing to remember, however, is time doesn't exist in the spirit world. You know that.
Yeah.
Time's a human creation. So everybody goes through the 12 phases of transition, regardless of how they die. In the case of an instant death, like a homicide or a suicide, or a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, months, even years. I had one gal call into my show for 2 years, and her father had Alzheimer's and was in phase 11 for 2 years. And so it's all predicated on what that spirit wants to explore and experience, because we all decide when we go, where we go, how we go, who's with us or not as we leave. this human existence and what all the circumstances are, where all of those. So when
Yeah.
I talk to people who say, we were with my grandmother for 2 weeks straight. We were 24/7 round the clock. Aunt Mary was on duty. She got up to go get a cup of coffee. She was out of the room maybe for 3 minutes, and grandma died while she was by herself. And they say, how? Why? What? Aunt Mary feels so guilty. I said, Grandma planned it that way. Grandma
Yeah.
wanted to be by herself. We don't know why. We can ask her when we get her on the radar from heaven, when we can talk to her spirit, but we all decide that, just like we decide where we're born, when we're born, to whom we're born, and the circumstances into which we're born, so our lives will have a trajectory rather, that will allow us to explore and experience things we want to in this lifetime. It's fascinating how all this works.
Absolutely. And I'm listening to what you're saying, and it makes sense because my dad died about a year and a half ago. And we all suspect he knew he was dying, but didn't tell any of us.
Mhm.
But how he lived his life, how he showed up, there was peace. And we suspect he did know certain things, but it was interesting though. It was almost like his soul was preparing before his body was. If I don't know if that makes sense though, but it's very interesting in what you're saying, right? And so, if we have somebody who is in an active dying phase and we're sitting vigil, or maybe people are into weeks of their grief and they're really not sure how to function, because there's that anticipatory grief, then there's the grief that we experience once the transition phase has been completed. Is there
Mhm.
actually something that people can do? Like, not manage the situation, but something that they can actually do to really support themselves through that? Because
Yeah.
the grief has so many different stages, and you can skip from 1 to 5 back to 3. Like, it's a very unique process. And some people say just give yourself time, but is there something people can do to support themselves during that?
Absolutely. Get the free download of my book,
Okay.
Angelic Attendants. Read
Okay.
it. There's a chart of the 12 phases of transition on my AskJulieRyan.com website. It's a free download. Download that, put that on your phone, save it on your phone as a photograph. And then you just ask, what phase is Johnny in? What phase is Grandma in? And you'll hear a number. Boom. Fast as you can snap your fingers, it'll come into your head, and then refer to the chart. For family members who are very afraid to die, there are a couple of things that I recommend. One is play the audiobook for them. It's 3 hours. The book is very short. I didn't want to write some 700-page, novel on this. It's like, get them the information quick. Here's how it can help. And there are lots of stories in there that validate what is discussed with the phases. But even if your loved one is in a coma or they're not able to communicate, hearing's the last thing to go. So play that audiobook for them in the room. You don't have to play it all
Mhm.
at once, play it in stages.
Yeah.
And then there's a chapter in the book, and there's a resource that we use too, that I've taught to all my students too, Courtney, which is called the Walk to Heaven for people
Mhm.
who are afraid to die. And it's a dress rehearsal of what's going to happen, how their spirit's going to detach from their body, how we're going to go in through a vortex like a black hole and get to the pearly gates, which look like this really big white yellowish plasma wall to me. And we go through it. By the way, I've never seen St. Peter sitting at the pearly gates with a clipboard going, yeah, you're allowed in. No, you got to go burn for eternity. It doesn't happen. But we
No.
go through the plasma wall, and there's this cheer, there's this roar that goes up, similar to what you'd hear in a stadium at a sporting event when a goal is scored or a touchdown, and there's 100,000 people going, what? Going nuts. It's that kind of a roar when we cross into the plasma wall. All their loved ones are there waiting for them. And then they'll get kind of swallowed into this mass of loved ones from all their lifetimes. And then I'll have to reach in there and pull them out and say, okay, This is what's going to happen. Let's go reattach your spirit to your body. And I find that that's really helpful to people that are afraid to die. So that's the best thing that I can suggest. And it's so helpful to the family too, to know that all these loved ones' spirits are around their grandmother or their spouse or God forbid their child. And they can go through those phases and it takes the fear out because when we're doing that anticipatory grief and we're with somebody who's dying, we're not only grieving the loss of that loved one, we're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to be there myself one day. Wonder what's happening. And this helps guide them to know that it's a glorious situation.
It is, and so much of what you're saying resonates from my own experiences of when my daughter passed, of when my father passed, and when I've brought through spirits and mediumship readings, very similar, kind of pulled through that vortex, that tunnel. And often all I see is like kind of like a wall, but it's just all light, like gold and
Yeah.
white, and it glitters, and they go through it. And there is a, it's like I get goosebumps when I talk
Yeah.
about it because
Yeah.
it's this reunion and there is absolutely nothing to fear. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is so interesting because ever since I was a little kid, I was always scared of dying and I was always scared of death. And I don't know why. Perhaps it was because of my near death experience when I was a baby, I'm not sure. But when I started embracing my mediumship and intentionally working with spirit, that was one of the first things they touched on to remove that. And I go, oh my God, I can't be the only one who's had that. So I love that you are putting this out there because there's people that do have a fear of death for whatever reason. And they may be highly intuitive as well, working mediumistically. And we got to sort that out because it's not an end. It's just a change from the
Right.
physical to the non-physical. This is so awesome. Julie, you
Yeah. Well,
said,
the other
oh,
thing
sorry.
about that
Yeah.
that plasma wall that's
Hmm.
heaven, astrophysicists and quantum physicists have pretty much come to the conclusion. I mean, there's lots of research that supports these theories that there's a fourth state of matter. We've got liquid, solid, gas, and plasma. Plasma is 99.9% of what we perceive in our human reality. And so it makes sense to me that when you and I are doing the mediumship thing, when I'm scanning somebody for a medical reading and I can see inside their body, we're working in the plasma field. And so I have goosebumps just saying that too. And then that plasma wall is what some people refer to as the veil or the other side or whatever. But it's just going through that. It's like walking through air. We change form. Water becomes a solid and then melts and becomes a gas and comes back to water. So I find that really fascinating in the again science catching up with woo woo and explaining this.
Definitely.
By the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
your dad, when you were talking about him, came in, he's still on your right. And he said that he suspected for 2 years before he passed that he wasn't going to be around much longer. And he said it became very apparent in the last 6 months of his life.
Totally accurate. And he
Yeah.
always stands on my right side.
Yeah.
He's always there. And it's so interesting though, because even in my mediumship circles that I teach, he's always showing up and bringing evidence of life eternal. And I go, wow, isn't that so interesting? Even if we have our religious beliefs, when we transition, there is this collective understanding that goes beyond any doctrine, dogma, or creed. And my dad was a born again Christian, and him and I had some clashes with my belief as a spiritualist and his as a Christian. And it's pretty incredible. I love that. So, when you touch on everybody goes to heaven,
Yeah.
absolutely. Some people believe there's purgatory or people are in a holding place. That's not been my experience. I don't believe that at all.
Me neither. And I was taught all that stuff.
Yeah.
So uh, there's a 14th century philosopher named Soren Kierkegaard, and he says there are two ways to be fooled. The first way is to believe something that isn't true. The second way is to not believe something that is true.
Mm.
And I love that. Furthermore, as far as everybody going to heaven, I have a personal story about that. May I share that
Yes.
about my dad?
Yes, please.
When my dad was dying, this was 4 years after my mom had passed, he was in a coma. He was on a ventilator, was in the ICU at a hospital. And I would do the night shift with him. He was there for several days, and the rest of the family come in during the day, and I'd go home and go to his house and take a nap, sleep, and then come back. So, but I could communicate with him telepathically. And he was a World War II veteran, served in the Navy. And when he got out of the Navy, he went to Rome to the seminary on the GI Bill and graduated from the Gregorian University there, where popes and St. Thomas Aquinas and all these, you know, historical church figures, big dogs, had graduated. And the GI Bill paid for all of it. Well, he obviously learned, all the church's doctrine there. He drank the serious Kool-Aid when he was there. So he was so afraid to die because he didn't think he was going to go to hell, but he was afraid he was going to have to go burn in purgatory for a long time. I kept saying, Dad, this is telepathically, Dad, please. Everybody goes to heaven. I've never seen angels drop any people into burning pits, their spirits. Everybody goes to heaven. He's like, well, how do you know? Well, he didn't see me as an authority on the church. Well, I wasn't. So a friend of mine said, are there any clergy spirits in the room with him? And I said, yeah, a bunch, because he had a bunch of friends who were priests and bishops and all that jazz. And one was a family friend who had died about 6 months earlier, a priest named Father Hanley, Father Jim Hanley, who married me, who baptized my son, went to high school with my parents, family friend. And I said to him, can you help me with this? And he laughed, and he was a jokester. He was just such a character. Next thing I know, Courtney, I'm in my dad's ICU room, and it's full of dead popes. And they all got their pope hats on and their shepherd rods from eons of ages of popes. And Father Hanley takes this one pope up to my dad's right shoulder. And I said to Father Hanley's spirit, well, who's that? And he said, Pius the 12th. I said, well, of course, Pius the 12th was in office when my dad was in Rome for all those years. My dad left 6 months before he was to be ordained, obviously, or I wouldn't be here. And he said, Pius the 12th. And I said, yeah, well, of course, my dad had been in his private library when his bishop had come over. He'd met him personally on more than one occasion. And Pius the 12th said, Tom, everybody goes to heaven. We're all waiting for you. You come when you're ready. Mm-hmm. And I could hear all these other popes in the background, kind of like in a scene from a play where the chorus is on stage and they're going, you can kind of hear them talking and they're agreeing. And my dad got the biggest smile on his face. They all disappeared. And my dad passed a few hours later.
Whoa.
So for me, I can hear it. I can see it. But when I got a room full of dead popes telling my dad, Tom, this is just, everybody goes to heaven. We're waiting for you. Come on when you're ready. That's all the proof I need.
And that, in and of itself, that story is going to resonate with so many people that are concerned about what's it going to be like when I pass or when my loved ones pass. There's nothing to fear,
Yeah.
even regardless of the manner of passing, whether that be through health, just it was your time, or, even a tragic death, a violent death. We're all going to make that transition.
Right.
And we're going to go into the light where we are held and greeted by so many people. And I love how you describe it, Julie, as a glorious experience. And it really can be for us that have that understanding that we still continue and we can still have these connections. For people that are listening, that are like, I want to be able to still keep that connection with my loved one. I want to be able to tap into my intuitive abilities. You know, what would you say to them? Because you often say, like, this is a skill, it's not just a gift. So, practically, someone who's listening that is feeling connected to the person they lost, where do they
Mhm.
actually start?
Well, if you're in deep grief, I always recommend ask your loved one to come appear to you in a dream. come visit you in your dreams because every night when we sleep, our brains rest and our bodies go back to the preset frequency of spirit. So imagine our heads are big satellite dishes and they receive and they transmit frequencies. Every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. And in order to get in touch with them, all you have to do is think of them. It doesn't matter whether they're in heaven. It doesn't matter whether you knew them when they were alive. It doesn't matter if it's connected to a body. If a spirit's connected to a body, that's how indigenous cultures have been able to communicate telepathically across thousands of miles, like the Aboriginal culture in Australia. That's one that's pretty well known. You just think of the person, and that tunes your satellite dish head. They're always broadcasting, but it's on the spirit frequency. And as we talked about before, Courtney, we're all spirits attached to a body having a human experience. And when our spirit is attached to a body, it vibrates more slowly simply because the body has mass. I use the analogy of imagine trying to run an electrical current through a bowl of pudding. It's going to
Mhm.
slow it down because the mass of the pudding. So when we raise our vibrational level, we can connect to the spirit channel. Similar to satellite TV, who knows how many shows they're broadcasting simultaneously, hundreds, if not thousands. And the show that we receive is going to be determined by what channel we've tuned to. Same with the spirit channel. So if somebody's in deep grief, the body's resets every night when we sleep, goes back to the spirit channel on its own. And it's easier for spirit to communicate with us because when we're in grief, when we feel bad, when we're stressed, whatever, we're on the I feel crappy channels. Think of old time country music. They're complaining about mama, the truck, and the dog, right? They're whining. Well, that makes you feel bad when you listen to that versus you're listening to disco or something upbeat. I grew up in the disco era. You cannot be in a bad mood and listen to disco. It's not possible. So I use that as an example. So that's how that works. That's number one. Number two is during the day, an easy way to raise your vibration is go face the sun outside with your eyes closed and stand there for a couple of minutes and envision yourself floating into the core of the sun. That's going to raise your vibrational level in a nanosecond. And then you say, hey, Grandma B, you know, and that connects your satellite dish head to her frequency, opens up a two-way radio communication, and then you just say something. And how you know that that's Grandma B answering you is it is that first thing, boom, fast as you can snap your fingers or before you've even finished the thought, whether it be a question or a statement, because time doesn't exist in the spirit world. So they're going to answer you oftentimes before you've even finished with the thought. That trips people up the most. So it's a practice, it's a muscle. The more you do it, the more validation you get, the more validation you get, the more you trust it. And that's just second nature.
Beautiful.
How do you do
Julie,
it?
how do I trust my connect to spirit or trust my intuition?
Both.
So, what I do is I always start off with an intention because I believe intention is like a key that opens the door. So,
Yeah.
if I'm going to be doing a mediumship reading, which I'll be doing later on today, I always get myself anchored in my body and just do a quick scan. Where am I at? Do a measure of where I'm at. And then I connect to my heart space and I move into that feeling of unconditional love because I feel that is the energy. I don't just feel, I know that's the energy that spirit comes in on. And so if I'm able to move into that frequency of unconditional love, that's going to naturally raise my vibration and allow me to attune to the spirit. And then I know that the first thoughts that come in are going to be spirit when they come in over my thinking or over my measure, if you will,
Yeah.
then I know that spirit. And if there's too much thinking and mental activity, I know that's Courtney.
Right.
So it's kind of that. And intuitively, it's interesting. I grew up in a Christian home and we were always taught about the gifts of the spirit. Biblically, there's some understanding there. I have some spiritual understanding. I kind of lean to the woo, the spiritual a little bit more. But mom always taught us about discernment. Trust that inner gut feeling. You get that gut instinct, that niggling, and lean into that. So to be honest, it's always been kind of second nature. And that's not a bragging thing, but it's always, oh, wait a minute. This just came out of nowhere.
Mhm.
And how does that feel? How does my body respond? Does that feel true? Or am I sitting with it, questioning, doubting, and being too mentally active in it? And for me, that's kind of how I've done that. And it's worked. But I've also, it's been actively with my development. It's been 12 years of active development.
Yeah.
And you learn more about yourself. It's really, I feel like this journey of self-discovery. Where are you at? Where are your thoughts? Where are your feelings? Who are you? And then
Yeah.
when you start intentionally asking the spirit to come forward, it'll be such a difference from who you are that you'll be able to quickly discern, oh, I don't think like that. Where did that picture come from? What's
Yeah.
going to happen? Start leaning
Well,
into that.
and to trust what's that first thing comes into your head, no
Yeah.
matter how crazy it sounds.
Yep.
I was talking to a client yesterday and her mother's spirit in heaven, and the mother said, or my client said, we were talking about my client's twin teenagers, boy and a girl. And grandma was talking about the girl's got a sharp tongue. Well, she's 15. It's her job right now. And the son is very cerebral and very brilliant and all of that. And she said, just feed him a lot of broccoli and bacon. We both started laughing. I said, broccoli and bacon? What does that mean anything to you? And my client laughed. She said, those are my mother's favorite two foods on the planet. So I hear broccoli and bacon and I'm laughing because it means nothing to me. And I think that's the point is you
Yeah.
and I, when we get information from spirit, it doesn't matter if it means anything to us. It matters what it means to the people with whom we're working. But they're so funny, aren't they, spirits? They are just
Absolutely.
hilarious. Hilarious.
They are. They don't take life too seriously like us humans.
Oh yeah.
They do. And so there's so much that can be learned from connecting to our loved ones and even channeling them. It's really an honor. It really is an honor. I
I
think it's
agree.
their generosity and their grace that allows us to even be a voice for them. And really, I feel when we're connecting from the other side or connecting to the other side, a lot of it is about inspiring the living.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Make the most of it here. And you're doing that through your books, your teachings, your podcast. It's incredible. And I just love what you've shared, your stories and your insights, because it's just fascinating where you're sharing how science is catching up to woo, like everything about it. It's brilliant.
Oh.
Julie, before one last thing, before we go, can you let people know what you have up and coming, how they can get in contact with you?
Yes, absolutely. Everything's at askjulieryan.com. Free copy of the book, free digital and audiobook download. Got it in Spanish too. askjulieryan.com. I have a training coming up to learn the whole buffet of psychicness. This is class 25. And we have hundreds and hundreds of people that have learned how to do everything that I do. Because remember, I learned how to do all of this and from more than 15 countries around the world. The only prerequisite is you got to speak English. And that's pretty easy for most people that are listening today, hopefully. And so that's at askjulieryan.com. It's May 16th and 17th online via Zoom live. We'll take breaks, we'll take lunch breaks all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and you'll be doing this stuff in the first hour. And it is a blast. We have so much fun. You're going to learn how to talk to spirit. You're going to learn how to do the medical, intuitive, and energy healing stuff, communicate with pets, do past lives, do spirit guides, angels, the whole nine yards. And we just have a ball. And then it comes with practice groups that are free for life. We right now have 9 a week. Then that's really the secret sauce. That's where your abilities really kick in because otherwise it's like you read a book or go to a conference and you learn stuff. But until you start doing it and get validation for what you're getting, that's when your skills really develop.
This is beautiful. And everybody, all of that information that Julie has shared is in the show notes. So go check it out right now. Julie, it's been so amazing to meet you, to connect with you, get to know you a little bit more, and to be able to learn more about the work that you are doing with the other side. It's so inspiring. Thank you so much.
Oh, my honor. Thank you for having me.
The Connected Spirit isn't just a podcast, it's a remembering of who we are, a remembering of our connection to spirit, and a remembering that we are never walking this path alone. Mediumship isn't just about speaking with spirits. It's about deepening the connection to our own spirit, to one another, and to the energy that moves through everything. So as you leave this space, ask yourself, what part of this conversation stirred something within you? What connection is spirit inviting you to strengthen? If this episode spoke to you, please share it, leave a review, and connect with me on Instagram at Medium Courtney Dawson, or visit my website at mediumcourtneydawson.com. Your presence in this community matters, because connection isn't just about what we seek, it's what we are. Until next time, trust your spirit, trust the unseen world, and trust that you are always, always connected.